We need to talk, David. I can't do this anymore. Those were the words that changed everything, not whispered in private, not after any warning signs I recognized. Right there in our kitchen on a Sunday evening while I was hunched over my laptop, trying to fix a critical software bug before Monday's demo. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is David Mitchell, 38 years old, founder and CEO of NexGen Solutions, and that was the moment my wife of 7 years decided our marriage was over. Rebecca stood there in that navy blue dress she'd bought the previous weekend, car keys already in hand, suitcase apparently packed and waiting in the hallway. I didn't even know she owned a suitcase that size. I closed my laptop slowly, trying to process what was happening. Are you serious? James has helped me see what I really want from life, what I deserve. She twisted her wedding ring off with practiced ease that suggested she'd been rehearsing this moment. I've been putting my career on hold while you chase this startup dream. I can't wait anymore. James Peterson, her boss at Pinnacle Technologies, the man who'd been mentoring her for the past 6 months while I bootstrapped our company from our spare bedroom. The CEO, whose handshake felt just a little too firm at the holiday party last December. When did this start? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the earthquake happening inside me. That's not important now. Rebecca placed her ring on the kitchen counter with a soft clink. James is waiting in the car. I'll send someone for the rest of my things. I nodded once, unable to find words as basic questions crashed through my mind. How long had this been happening? Were there signs I'd missed? Did everyone know except me? She paused at the door. You're so wrapped up in your company that you never saw what was happening right in front of you. That's always been your problem, David. The door closed. Just like that, 7 years ended in a 3-minute conversation. I sat alone in our kitchen, my kitchen now, listening to the sound of James Peterson's luxury SUV pulling away from the curb. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man had built his fortune with software similar to what I was creating, only less innovative, less user-friendly, and about 5 years earlier. I met Rebecca during my final year at the University of Washington. She was studying marketing. I was finishing my computer science degree. We were both ambitious, both certain we'd make our mark on the Seattle tech scene, but while she saw herself climbing the corporate ladder, I dreamed of building something from scratch. We complement each other perfectly, she used to say during those early years. You build amazing things, and I'll help the world see how amazing they are. After college, we both landed jobs at Horizon Technologies, a mid-sized software company. Rebecca quickly caught the attention of upper management. With her talent for crafting compelling narratives around technical products, I spent 3 years building my skills, learning the industry, and secretly developing the concept that would eventually become NexGen. On our 5th anniversary, over dinner at our favorite restaurant overlooking Lake Union, I showed her my business plan. I want to leave Horizon, I told her. I've been developing this security protocol that could revolutionize cloud storage. It's faster, more secure, and more energy efficient than anything currently on the market. Rebecca studied the documents with the critical eye I'd come to rely on. The concept is solid, she admitted, but the timing is terrible. We just bought the house, and the market is so competitive right now. That's exactly why the timing is perfect, I argued. Everyone's rushing to cloud solutions without addressing the fundamental security flaws. We could be the ones to solve this before it becomes a crisis. She sighed. How would we pay the mortgage? My salary alone won't cover it. I've been saving. We have enough for me to work on this full-time for 8 months. If I don't have a viable product and at least initial investor interest by then, I'll go back to a regular job. After a week of discussions, spreadsheets and promises, she reluctantly agreed. 8 months, she emphasized. Not a day more. I kissed her, certain I could make her proud. We're going to build something extraordinary together. That was the plan anyway. Reality proved more challenging. The first 6 months were brutal. Working from our home office, I coded 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. Each night I'd collapse into bed, long after Rebecca was asleep, then wake before her to continue. Weekend hikes and dinner dates with friends disappeared from our calendar. Our conversations shortened to passing updates about basic necessities. You need to eat something, she'd say, placing a sandwich next to my keyboard. Thanks, making progress on the encryption module, I'd reply without looking up. Around month 7, I had a breakthrough. The core algorithm finally worked the way I'd envisioned, reducing processing time by 78% while maintaining military-grade security. I called Michael Collins, my former colleague, and the only person besides Rebecca who knew what I was building. This is it, I told him after demonstrating the prototype. This could change everything. Michael, always the pragmatic one, tested every aspect of the system, trying to break it, find flaws, uncover weaknesses. After 3 hours, he sat back in his chair with a low whistle. David, this is genuinely revolutionary. Pinnacle and the other big players would kill for this technology. I don't want to sell it, I said immediately. I want to build a company around it. That requires serious capital and a team. You can't do this alone. I know. That's why I'm hoping you'll join me. Michael raised an eyebrow. Leave my stable job with benefits to join your unfunded startup. Exactly. He laughed, then grew serious. Let me think about it. But even if I say yes, we'll need money. Have you talked to Rebecca about extending your timeline? I hadn't. The 8-month deadline was approaching, and while I had a working prototype, I had no investors, no customers, and no income. That night, I prepared Rebecca's favorite meal, opened a bottle of wine we'd been saving, and made my pitch. I need more time, I admitted after showing her the prototype. What I've built works better than I even hoped, but I need another 6 months to secure funding and build a team. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She swirled the wine in her glass, her expression unreadable. 6 more months of me carrying all the financial weight? 6 more months of barely seeing my husband? I know it's a lot to ask, but we're so close. Michael is considering joining as co-founder, and with his network, we could secure seed funding within months. Michael. She set down her glass. You discussed this with Michael before talking to me? I needed to know if the technology was viable from someone who understands it. And I don't understand it. It wasn't a question. That's not what I meant. You understand the market and messaging better than anyone, but Michael could validate the technical aspects. She was quiet for a long moment. I got a promotion today. You did? That's amazing. Why didn't you tell me right away? Because for the past 7 months, everything has been about your company, your dream, your vision. She took a deep breath. The promotion comes with a significant raise. Enough that we could manage if you needed more time. But I need to know that I'm not just financing your dream, I'm part of it. Relief washed over me. Of course you're part of it. This is our future we're building. She smiled, but something didn't reach her eyes. Then I have a condition. I want you to consider presenting your technology to Pinnacle Technologies. My new role means I'll be working directly with James Peterson, and he's always looking for innovations to acquire. Acquire is exactly what I don't want, I explained. I don't want to sell the technology. I want to build NexGen around it. Just meet with him. No commitment. If nothing else, it could open doors to other investors who would support your vision. To keep the peace, I agreed to a meeting. What harm could it do to get feedback from someone like James Peterson? His company had dominated the industry for years, and a good word from him could indeed open doors. 2 weeks later, I found myself in Pinnacle's gleaming headquarters, presenting my prototype to James himself. Rebecca had arranged everything, even coaching me on how to frame the presentation for maximum impact. James was impressive, tall, confident, with the easy charisma of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. He asked insightful questions and seemed genuinely impressed by what I'd built. "This is remarkable work, David," he said after my demonstration. "The encryption method alone could revolutionize data security." Pride swelled in my chest. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." "I'd like to make you an offer," he continued. "Pinnacle would like to acquire your technology for $2 million. The figure hit me like a physical blow. $2 million was life-changing money, far more than I'd expected for a prototype. "I'm flattered," I replied carefully, "but I'm not looking to sell. I want to build this into a company." James leaned back, studying me. "Building a company requires more than good technology. You need capital, talent, infrastructure, market access. You'd be competing against established players like us, with all our resources and connections. I understand the challenges. Do you?" His tone remained friendly, but his eyes sharpened. 9 out of 10 startups fail, David. You have something valuable right now. Tomorrow, someone else might develop something similar, and your window of opportunity closes. I glanced at Rebecca, who sat beside James during the presentation. Her expression urged me to consider the offer. "I appreciate your advice," I said, "but I believe in what we're building." James nodded, seemingly respecting my decision. "The offer stands for 2 weeks. Think about it. Talk it over with Rebecca." He stood, extending his hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm impressed with your work." On the drive home, Rebecca couldn't contain her excitement. $2 million, David. Do you know what we could do with that kind of money? "We could invest it in building NexGen properly," I suggested. She sighed. "Or we could buy a better house, travel, start a family without financial stress. Why risk everything when there's a sure thing right in front of us?" Because I didn't build this just to hand it over to Pinnacle. They'd bury it if it competed with their existing products." "James wouldn't do that. He recognizes the value." I glanced at her. "You seem very confident about what James would or wouldn't do." "I work with him now," she defended. "I see how he operates. He's brilliant." That night marked the beginning of a growing divide between us. I refused the offer, as I'd always intended. Rebecca grew increasingly distant, working later hours and attending more team-building events at Pinnacle. When she was home, conversations about my company triggered arguments. "Michael officially joined as co-founder," I told her one evening, 3 months after the Pinnacle meeting. "Congratulations," she said without looking up from her phone. "We have a meeting next week with Thomas Rivera. He's a partner at Sequoia Ventures and interested in what we're building." "That's nice." "Rebecca," I set down my coffee, "what's happening with us?" She finally looked up. "What do you mean?" "You're barely present anymore when we talk. About NexGen, you shut down. I thought we were building this future together." "I thought so too," she said quietly. "But it's becoming clear that NexGen is your priority, not our marriage." "That's not fair. I'm working this hard for us. Are you? Or are you doing this for yourself, your vision, your ego?" The argument escalated from there, ending with slammed doors and silent treatment that lasted 3 days. It became our new pattern, brief civil interactions interrupted by intense arguments about priorities, money, and time. Meanwhile, NexGen began gaining momentum. The meeting with Thomas Rivera exceeded all expectations, resulting in a $1.5 million seed investment. Michael and I rented a small office space and hired our first 2 employees, including Samantha Wright, a brilliant developer who immediately strengthened our team. 6 months after refusing Pinnacle's offer, we launched our first product, a secure cloud storage solution using our proprietary encryption protocol. Early adopters praised its speed and security, and tech blogs began mentioning NexGen as a promising newcomer in the cybersecurity space. I brought home a bottle of champagne the day we signed our 10th corporate client. "We should celebrate," I told Rebecca. "The company is really taking off." She accepted a glass, but remained subdued. "James mentioned your company today," she said casually. "He's impressed with how quickly you've established yourselves." "That's nice to hear," I replied, surprised. "How often do you discuss NexGen with him?" "We don't. He just brought it up." She sipped her champagne. "He's invited me to join the executive strategy retreat in Lake Tahoe next weekend. It's a big opportunity for me." "Next weekend? But that's our anniversary." "I know, I'm sorry, but this could fast-track my career." I set down my glass, the celebration forgotten. "Your career has been moving pretty fast since you started, working directly with James." Her eyes flashed. "What exactly are you implying?" "Nothing. I just find it interesting that your boss takes such a personal interest in your development." "Maybe because he recognizes my talent," she snapped. "Ugh, maybe because he actually sees me." The words hung between us, weighted with accusation. I didn't respond, and she didn't elaborate. That night, she slept in the guest room. She left for Lake Tahoe 3 days later. When Rebecca returned from the retreat, something had shifted. She was more confident, more decisive, and more distant than ever. Our conversations became purely transactional, coordinating household logistics like roommates rather than partners. 2 weeks later, she dropped the bombshell during that fateful Sunday evening in our kitchen. After she left with James, I sat motionless for almost an hour, trying to process what had happened. Then I did the only thing that made sense. I went back to work. The next morning I told Michael everything. "She left you for Peterson?" His outrage was comforting in its intensity. "That corporate shark has been circling your technology from the beginning." "This isn't about the technology," I said, though a small voice in my head wondered if that was entirely true. "Isn't it? You refused to sell to Pinnacle, so Peterson found another way to get close to what we're building, through your wife." "Rebecca wouldn't share our proprietary information," I insisted, though the conviction in my voice had faded. "Maybe not intentionally," Michael conceded. "But pillow talk happens, and Peterson is smart enough to piece things together from casual conversations." The possibility hadn't occurred to me, and it planted a seed of paranoia that grew over the following weeks. I reviewed all our security protocols, changed access passwords, and kept our newest innovations even more closely guarded. Meanwhile, Rebecca moved in with James, filing for divorce with terms that were surprisingly favorable to me. She wanted the process quick and clean, demanding little from our shared assets. Within 60 days, our marriage was legally over, dissolved with the same efficiency she'd always brought to her professional life. I channeled everything into NexGen, all my energy, all my focus, all my pain. The company became my refuge and purpose. Our team expanded to 15 people, each bringing unique talent to our mission. Samantha proved especially valuable, developing a complementary technology that enhanced our original protocol. 9 months after Rebecca left, we were finalizing our Series A funding round when concerning news emerged. "Pinnacle is launching a new security platform next quarter," Samantha reported during our morning meeting. "The marketing materials describe features suspiciously similar to what we're developing." "That could be coincidence," I suggested, though my stomach tightened. "Maybe," Michael agreed, "but the timing is convenient, right as we're gaining significant market traction." Dean, I spent that evening reviewing Pinnacle's public information about their upcoming product. The similarities to our technology were concerning but not definitive. Without seeing their code, it was impossible to know if they'd somehow accessed our intellectual property. The next morning, I received an unexpected email from Thomas Rivera, our lead investor. Need to discuss Pinnacle situation. Dinner tonight? Over steaks at his favorite restaurant, Thomas laid out information his firm had gathered. Pinnacle is rushing their new platform to market, he explained. They've pulled developers from other projects and are working around the clock. You think they're trying to beat us to wider adoption? Thomas cut his steak methodically. I think they're trying to devalue your company before your Series A closes. If they launch a similar product from a trusted name like Pinnacle, it could spook some of your investors. That's unethical, I protested. That's business. Thomas studied me. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What can I do? We don't have proof they've stolen anything, just suspicious similarities. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Thomas smiled slightly. Pinnacle isn't the only major player interested in secure cloud solutions. Their biggest competitor, Meridian Systems, has been watching your progress too. You've been talking to Meridian about us? It's my job to protect our investment, Thomas replied smoothly. Meridian's CEO, Eleanor Zhao, is very impressed with what you've built. She'd like to meet. I'm not selling NexGen, I said immediately. Who said anything about selling? I'm talking about a strategic partnership, one that would give you the resources to go toe-to-toe with Pinnacle. 3 days later, I found myself in Meridian's Seattle headquarters, presenting our technology to Eleanor Zhao and her executive team. Unlike James Peterson's sleek charisma, Eleanor projected calculated competence, asking precise questions that demonstrated her technical understanding. Your encryption protocol is at least 2 years ahead of current market solutions, she concluded after my presentation. Combined with our distribution network, it could reshape the industry. That's my goal, I agreed, though I'm committed to maintaining NexGen's independence. Eleanor nodded, respecting the boundary. Independence doesn't preclude partnership. I propose an arrangement. Meridian invests $10 million for a 15% stake in NexGen. You maintain control and continue development while gaining access to our global sales channels. The offer was compelling. Significant capital without surrendering our autonomy, plus access to Meridian's established customer base. After a week of negotiations and due diligence, we accepted. The partnership news made instant waves in the tech community. Our Series A round closed, oversubscribed, and several elite developers suddenly became interested in joining our team. More importantly, it positioned us as a serious player with the resources to challenge established companies, including Pinnacle. I didn't hear from Rebecca during this time, though mutual friends occasionally mentioned seeing her with James. At industry events, I focused on healing by building something meaningful, something that would outlast the pain of betrayal. 14 months after Rebecca walked out of our kitchen, NexGen had grown to 42 employees, with offices in Seattle and Portland. Our secure cloud platform serviced over 300 corporate clients, and our revenue had crossed the milestone that officially made us profitable. The success was validating, but didn't fill the personal void. I dated occasionally, though nothing serious developed. My apartment remained spartly furnished, more a place to sleep than a home. The company consumed most of my waking hours, which was exactly how I wanted it. Then came the industry rumor that changed everything. Pinnacle Technologies was exploring acquisition options. Multiple sources confirmed they're in financial trouble, Samantha reported, having heard the whispers from former colleagues. Their new security platform is months behind schedule and bleeding money. Apparently, it's not performing as expected, Michael laughed without humor. Trying to replicate our technology without understanding the underlying principles. Poetic justice. I felt no satisfaction at the news. If Pinnacle gets acquired, what happens to our partnership with Meridian? The competitive landscape could shift dramatically. That evening, Eleanor Zhao called me personally, something she rarely did. "I assume you've heard the Pinnacle rumors," she began without preamble. "Yes, though I don't have confirmed details." "I do." Her voice was measured. "They're quietly looking for buyers, and their situation is worse than the public knows. The failed security platform has created a significant financial hole." I processed this information. "How does this affect our partnership?" "That depends on you, David. Meridian is considering making an offer for Pinnacle." The statement hit me with unexpected force. "You want to acquire them?" "Their client base and remaining IP portfolio have value, despite recent missteps. The question is whether such a move would create complications for our relationship with NexGen, given your history." "My personal history," she meant. "The fact that Pinnacle's CEO had taken my wife. My only concern would be how this affects our business interests," I replied professionally. "NexGen's technology would obviously be a key consideration in any integration. It plans." "I'm glad you see it that way," Eleanor said, "because I'd like to propose something more ambitious. What if NexGen participated in this acquisition?" "What exactly are you suggesting?" "A joint venture. Meridian provides the majority of capital, but NexGen contributes both investment and your superior technology. Post-acquisition, you would lead the integration of all security and cloud services across both Pinnacle and Meridian platforms." The proposal was unexpected and enormously attractive from a business perspective. It would instantly establish our technology as the industry standard and accelerate our growth by years. "I'd need to discuss this with my team and board," I said. "Of course, but I need your personal buy-in first, given the delicate nature of the situation." After hanging up, I stood at my apartment window overlooking the Seattle skyline, contemplating the twist of fate. The company that had tried to buy my technology, whose CEO had taken my wife, was now potentially going to be partly owned by my company. The irony wasn't lost on me. I called Michael and shared Eleanor's proposal. "This is the opportunity of a lifetime," he said immediately. "But can you handle working with Peterson during the transition? And potentially seeing Rebecca?" The question gave me pause. A year ago, the prospect would have been unbearable. Now I felt a curious detachment. "This isn't about them," I realized aloud. "It's about the technology we've built and where it belongs in the market." The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of confidential meetings, financial analyses, and strategic planning. Thomas Rivera's investment firm enthusiastically backed the joint venture, contributing additional capital to strengthen our position. Our board unanimously approved the participation. 27 days after Eleanor's call, the deal was confirmed. Meridian Systems and NexGen Solutions would jointly acquire Pinnacle Technologies, with the formal announcement scheduled for the following Monday. What none of us expected was the leak that occurred 3 days before the official announcement. The Seattle Business Journal published a brief article with limited details of the acquisition, sending shockwaves through the industry and causing Pinnacle's already troubled stock to plummet further. That evening, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in over 18 months, Rebecca. I stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. "Hello, Rebecca?" "Is it true?" Her voice was tight, controlled, but with an underlying tension I recognized from our worst arguments. "Is NexGen really part of the group buying Pinnacle?" "I can't discuss that," I replied evenly. "David, please. James is completely blindsided. The board kept him in the dark about how bad things were. That sounds like an internal Pinnacle issue." A pause. "We need to talk, in person." "I don't think that's necessary." "It is," she insisted. "There are aspects of this situation you don't understand. Please, 1 hour of your time. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her the following morning at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. She arrived precisely on time, dressed in the polished business attire that had become her uniform at Pinnacle. The sight of her sent a complex wave of emotions through me, muted by time, but not entirely resolved. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as she sat down, coffee already waiting for her, oat milk latte with an extra shot, her usual order that I'd automatically purchased. "What do we need to discuss, Rebecca?" She wrapped her hands around the cup. "First, is the acquisition definite? You know I can't confirm or deny that." "James is devastated," she continued as if I'd answered. "Everything he's built over the past decade is crumbling. The new security platform was supposed to save the company, but it's been a disaster." "Technical innovation isn't something you can force or rush," I observed neutrally. "The stress has been unbearable. Our relationship is—" She hesitated. "It's not what I thought it would be." I kept my expression impassive, refusing to be drawn into her personal drama. "Rebecca, why am I here?" She took a deep breath. "Because I think I made a terrible mistake. With us, with everything." The words hung between us as I processed their implication. 18 months ago, I would have given anything to hear her say that. Now it felt like a message delivered to a different person. "If this is about trying to influence the acquisition—" "It's not," she interrupted. "It's about us. I've had a lot of time to think about what I threw away. The life we were building. Your vision that I was too impatient to believe in. I studied her, trying to separate genuine regret from potential manipulation. You left quite definitively." "I was wrong," she said simply. "Blinded by James's status and promises, I convinced myself you didn't see me anymore, that your company had become everything. But the truth is, I was the one who stopped seeing what we had." "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already knew. She reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of mine. "That maybe we could try again. Not immediately, but eventually. Start with conversations, rebuild what was broken." For a brief moment, I imagined that alternate future. Reconciliation, rebuilding trust, perhaps even finding happiness together again. But the image wouldn't solidify, like trying to reassemble shattered glass. "The timing of this realization is interesting," I noted. "Right as Pinnacle faces acquisition and James faces potential unemployment." Her expression hardened slightly. "That's unfair. Yes, the situation prompted reflection, but my feelings are genuine." "Maybe they are," I conceded. "But here's what I've learned, Rebecca. Trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, but never to its original design. It becomes something different, something guarded." "People make mistakes," she pressed. "They grow and change." "They do." I nodded. "I've changed too. The man who would have done anything to hear you say these words doesn't exist anymore." Her eyes glistened. "So that's it? No possibility of forgiveness?" "Damn, I forgave you months ago," I said truthfully. "Holding on to anger was only hurting me, but forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the past." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, circling through variations of the same theme. When we finally parted outside the coffee shop, there was a finality to our goodbye that hadn't existed when she'd walked out of our kitchen 18 months earlier. 3 days later, I stood beside Eleanor Zhao at the press conference announcing Meridian and NexGen's joint acquisition of Pinnacle Technologies. Cameras flashed as we outlined our vision for integrating the companies and establishing new industry standards for secure cloud computing. From my position at the podium, I could see James Peterson sitting in the third row, his expression carefully neutral despite the corporate execution he was witnessing. Beside him sat Rebecca, her eyes fixed on me as I detailed how NexGen's technology would replace Pinnacle's failed security platform. The irony wasn't lost on anyone familiar with the history. The small startup, now absorbing part of the established company that had once tried to acquire it. The engineer who had refused to sell his innovation, now directing the future of the larger corporation. The husband who had been left behind, now standing in a position of control over his wife's lovers. Professional fate. But as I concluded my remarks and the audience applauded, I felt no triumph in their discomfort, no vindication in their reversal of fortune. Success wasn't about proving Rebecca wrong for leaving or punishing James for taking her. It was about building something valuable and watching it grow beyond what anyone, including myself, had imagined possible. Later that evening, as the acquisition team celebrated at an exclusive restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay, Thomas Rivera raised his glass in a toast. "To David Mitchell," he announced to the assembled executives, "who built something too valuable to sell and too important to fail." As glasses clinked around the table, I caught Samantha's eye across the room. Her smile reflected the shared journey, the late nights, the breakthroughs, the setbacks, and the ultimate validation of our vision. In that moment, surrounded by colleagues who had become friends and partners, who had become allies, I realized I had built more than a company. I had built a future that was entirely mine, shaped by my choices rather than defined by someone else's departure. And that, more than any acquisition or vindication, was the true success story. The drive to our empty office that Monday morning after Rebecca left was surreal. Traffic moved as usual. Coffee shops served their morning crowds. The world continued, spinning despite my personal earthquake. The rational part of my brain knew this was normal. My crisis wasn't a global event, but it still felt wrong somehow. How could everything look so ordinary when nothing would ever be the same? I arrived early, before any of our small team, and sat in my darkened office staring at the framed photo on my desk. Rebecca and I on Mount Rainier, wind-blown but smiling. During a rare weekend break I'd taken last year, I placed it face down in my desk drawer. There would be time for grief later. Right now, NexGen needed leadership. Michael arrived 30 minutes later, coffee in hand. One look at my face told him something was wrong. "You look like hell," he said, closing my office door. "What happened?" I explained the situation in clinical terms. Rebecca had left, moved in with her boss. Our marriage was over. Michael's expressions cycled through shock, anger, and finally a fierce protectiveness that reminded me why our friendship had endured for over a decade. "I'll kill him," he growled, pacing the small office. "Corporate vulture. First he tries to buy your technology, then he takes your wife." "It takes two people to destroy a marriage," I said, surprising myself with the admission. "Rebecca made her choice." "Still, the timing is suspicious. Peterson's been interested in what we're building since day one." The thought had occurred to me too, though I'd pushed it away as paranoia. "You think he pursued Rebecca to get information about our technology?" Michael shrugged. "I'm just saying his interest in her started right after you refused his acquisition offer, and she had access to a lot of our early development discussions." The sick feeling in my stomach intensified. Rebecca had never signed formal employment documents with NexGen. She wasn't officially part of the company, but she'd certainly been privy to our plans through countless dinner conversations. I'd talked through technical challenges with her, not expecting her to solve them, but using her as a sounding board. How much had she absorbed? How much might she have inadvertently shared? "We need to do a security review," I decided, "and accelerate our patent applications." "Already on it," Michael assured me. "And David, take the week off if you need it. I can handle things here." I shook my head. "Work is the only thing keeping me sane right now, but I appreciate it." The next few weeks passed in a disorienting blur. By day, I immersed myself completely in NexGen, reviewing code, meeting with potential clients, refining our technology. The staff knew something was wrong. My bloodshot eyes and rumpled clothes told that story, but professional boundaries kept them from asking directly. I was grateful for the space to maintain at least the appearance of normalcy. By night, I returned to the house that now felt cavernous without Rebecca's presence. I slept on the couch, unable to face our bedroom. The silence was oppressive, broken only by delivery drivers bringing takeout I barely tasted. The pain came in waves, physical in its intensity. One moment I'd be reviewing financial projections, the next doubled over as if struck, memories ambushing me without warning. Rebecca and I dancing in the kitchen while making dinner. The way she used to leave post-it notes with silly drawings. In my laptop bag. Her laugh, that full-bodied, unrestrained laugh, when something genuinely amused her. These memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, scenes from a movie I'd watched long ago rather than my actual life. 3 weeks after she left, her lawyer contacted me. Rebecca wanted a quick, clean divorce. She wasn't seeking alimony or even half of our assets, just her personal belongings and a fair division of our savings. The generosity should have been a relief, but instead felt like salt in the wound. She could afford to be magnanimous because she was moving to someone better. I signed the papers without argument. What was the point of fighting? The documents, made official what? Was already reality. Our 7-year relationship had ended. I was 38, suddenly single, living in a half-empty house, pouring every waking hour into a company that still had more potential than proven success. The divorce was finalized with startling efficiency, just 62 days after she walked out. I received the court notification via email while in a meeting with a potential client. My hands shook so badly I had to excuse myself, locking the bathroom door before releasing a single strangled sob. Then I washed my face, straightened my tie, and returned to close the deal. The company needed this contract. My personal collapse would have to wait. That evening, Michael insisted on taking me out for drinks. "You can't keep going like this," he said, sliding a whiskey across the table. "You've lost weight. You barely sleep. I'm worried about you, man." I swirled the amber liquid, watching light refract through the glass. I keep running through everything, trying to pinpoint where it went wrong. Was it when I started NexGen? Was it before that? Did she ever really believe in what we were building? "Maybe it wasn't about you at all," Michael suggested. "Some people are always looking for the next upgrade. Jobs, houses, partners. Peterson offered status, money, the fast track to the life she wanted. She never indicated she was unhappy, not directly." "Would you have noticed if she did?" His question wasn't accusatory, just honest. "You've been working 18-hour days for over a year." The truth in his observation stung. I thought we had an understanding. This intensity was temporary. Once NexGen was established, things would balance out. "Did you tell her that explicitly, or just assume she knew?" I took a long sip of whiskey, letting the burn distract from the more. Painful realization forming. I assumed a lot of things. "Look," Michael leaned forward, "what happened is awful, but you can't change it. The question is, what now? What do you want your life to look like going forward?" It was a simple question with no simple answer. For the past 7 years, my future had been intertwined with Rebecca's. Our goals, our timeline, our vision for building a life together, all of it now obsolete. The blank canvas before me was both terrifying and strangely liberating. "I want NexGen to succeed," I said finally. "Not just to prove something to Rebecca or Peterson, but because I believe in what we're creating." Good start. What else? I considered the question. "I want to stop sleeping on my couch and actually process what happened, instead of just burying myself in work." Michael nodded. "And personally?" "Eventually, I mean." "I have no idea," I admitted. "I can't even imagine dating again." The thought Makes me nauseous. Nobody's saying you have to jump back into dating, but you need something besides work in your life. People, activities, whatever gave you joy before all this. The problem was, I couldn't remember what that might have been. Rebecca had been so central to my life for so long that my identity felt fractured without her. Who was David Mitchell when not part of David and Rebecca? What did he enjoy? What mattered to him beyond his company? These questions haunted me as I finally forced myself to address the practical realities of my new life. I sold our house, too big, too full of memories, and bought a downtown apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Elliott Bay. I hired a designer to furnish it, having neither the time nor inclination to select furniture. The result was stylish but impersonal, like an upscale hotel suite. It didn't feel like home, but nowhere did anymore. 4 months after Rebecca left, I received an unexpected call from Harold Jenkins, a former colleague from Horizon Technologies who now worked at Pinnacle. "David, hope I'm not crossing any lines here," he began awkwardly. "I heard about you and Rebecca. Tough break." "Thanks, Harold. What can I do for you?" "Well, it's more what I thought you should know." He lowered his voice. "There's a project here codenamed Phoenix. Very hush-hush, but rumor is it's a security protocol for cloud storage. Something that would compete directly with what you're building at NexGen." My stomach tightened. "That's interesting timing." "Yeah, well, the other interesting thing is that James has been heavily involved, even though it's not normally his area, and he's brought Rebecca into several closed-door meetings about it. The confirmation of my worst fears hit harder than expected." "I appreciate the information, Harold. Watch your back, David. James doesn't like losing, and he viewed your rejection of his acquisition offer as a personal insult." After hanging up, I sat motionless, processing the implications. Pinnacle was developing a competing product with suspicious timing. James had unusual personal involvement. Rebecca was participating in closed-door meetings. The connections weren't definitive, but they painted a concerning picture. I called our patent attorney immediately, urging him to expedite our applications. Then I met with our development team, instituting stricter security protocols without explaining exactly why. The sense of betrayal, professional piled atop personal, left a bitter taste I couldn't shake. That night, I dreamed of Rebecca for the first time since she left. Not romantic dreams, or even angry ones, but Rebecca sitting in a conference room, explaining my technology to James Peterson and a team of engineers. I woke sweating, tangled in sheets, the dream images fading but the anxiety lingering. Had I unconsciously suspected something all along? Were there warning signs I'd missed? Rebecca's increasing interest in the technical aspects of NexGen, her questions about our development timeline, her push for me to meet with Peterson, the pieces assembled into a pattern I couldn't unsee. The next morning I called Michael to relay Harold's information. "We need to move faster," I concluded. "If Pinnacle gets something to market first, even an inferior version, it could damage our position." Agreed, but we also need to be smart. "About this," Michael cautioned. "Rushing development could lead to security flaws or performance issues. Our advantage is quality, not just speed." He was right, as usual. Michael had always been the steadying influence to my sometimes impatient drive. Together, we developed a plan to accelerate certain aspects of our development while maintaining rigorous testing protocols. I also decided to expand our team, bringing on Samantha Wright, a brilliant security specialist I'd tried to recruit months earlier. Samantha joined us just as we were preparing for a crucial investor presentation. Thomas Rivera had arranged for his partners at Sequoia Ventures to hear our pitch, with potential funding that would transform NexGen's capabilities. The stakes were enormous. The night before the presentation, I worked late at the office, refining slides and rehearsing key points. Around midnight, exhausted but too wired to sleep. I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Images I'd avoided for months. Rebecca and I in happier times, vacations, dinner parties, quiet moments at home. Her smile, gradually changing over time, becoming more polished, more camera-ready, less spontaneous. When had that shift occurred? Before or after she started working closely with Peterson? Had our relationship been ending long before she actually left and I'd been too preoccupied to notice? A text from Michael interrupted my spiral. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day." I put the phone away, forcing myself to focus on what I could control. The past was immutable. The future, professionally at least, was within my influence. The next morning, fueled by too much caffeine and too little sleep, I delivered what Michael later called the most passionate pitch I've ever heard. I spoke about NexGen's mission to revolutionize data security, about our technological advantages, about the market opportunity before us. But mostly I spoke about trust, how our entire digital infrastructure depended on it, how fragile it was, how devastating its breach could be. "When trust is broken," I said, making eye contact with each investor, "the damage ripples outward, affecting everything it touches. Our technology creates a new foundation for digital trust, stronger, more resilient, more adaptable to emerging threats." Thomas Rivera watched me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. When the presentation ended and the partners began their deliberation, he pulled me aside. "That wasn't just about technology, was it?" he asked quietly. I considered denying the personal undercurrent, maintaining professional distance. Instead, I opted for honesty. "Life experiences shape our understanding of problems worth solving." Thomas nodded. "The personal connection makes your vision more compelling, not less. You understand the stakes viscerally." 3 hours later, Sequoia Ventures committed $1.5 million in seed funding, more than we'd initially hoped for. Thomas would join our board, bringing valuable connections throughout the tech industry. The investment wasn't just capital. It was validation that our vision had merit beyond my personal conviction. That evening, we celebrated at an upscale restaurant downtown, the team united in a moment of triumph. Champagne flowed, toasts were made, possibilities discussed with growing excitement. For the first time in months, I felt something like happiness, not the carefree joy of before, but a measured satisfaction in progress, hard won. As the celebration wound down, Samantha, our newest team member, lingered at the table. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," she began hesitantly. "But I wanted to say, I admire how you've handled everything." "Everything?" I asked, puzzled by her meaning. She glanced away, embarrassed. "The personal situation, with your ex-wife and Pinnacle. It's common knowledge in certain circles, but you've never let it affect your leadership or vision for NexGen." Udi. The realization that my private pain was common knowledge sent an uncomfortable chill through me. Of course it would be. The tech community in Seattle was relatively small. Gossip traveled fast, and the Peterson-Rebecca connection was too juicy to remain private. "Thank you," I managed, unsure what else to say. "I left my previous company because of toxic leadership," Samantha continued. "People who put ego and personal vendettas above creating something valuable. You could have gone that route after what happened, but you didn't. That's why I wanted to join NexGen." Her perspective caught me off guard. I hadn't considered how my response to personal betrayal might be viewed by others, how it might influence their perception of NexGen itself. The company wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every person who'd committed their talent and time to our vision. My personal conduct reflected on all of them. That night, I returned to my apartment and for the first time in months, really looked at my surroundings. The impersonal space I'd been occupying but not living in. The boxes still unpacked, the walls bare of any personal touch. I'd been existing in limbo, neither moving forward nor truly accepting what had happened. I unpacked those boxes until dawn, arranging books on shelves, hanging art I'd selected years ago, finding places for the objects that held meaning for me independently of Rebecca. With each item placed deliberately in my new space, I felt a small piece of myself returning, not the same as before, but recognizable nonetheless. The next morning, I made two significant decisions. First, I called a real estate agent about listing the house Rebecca and I had shared. It was time to remove that lingering tie. Second, I implemented a weekly team dinner at NexGen, creating space for connection beyond our technical collaboration. If I was rebuilding myself, I could rebuild how I approached leadership too. The company continued to grow, fueled by Sequoia's investment and our team's expanding capabilities. We secured patents for our core technology, providing some protection against Pinnacle's potential encroachment. We signed our first major corporate clients, companies willing to bet on innovative technology from a promising startup. Through it all, I kept hearing whispers about Pinnacle's competing project, development delays, technical challenges, internal friction. The information came through industry connections, former colleagues, even potential clients evaluating both companies. While I never actively sought these updates, I couldn't help but register them with a complex mix of vindication and concern. 6 months after Rebecca left, I ran into her at an industry conference. I'd known she might be there. Pinnacle always had a significant presence at these events, but still found myself unprepared for the actual encounter. She was standing near the refreshment table during a networking break, engaged in conversation with someone I didn't recognize. Her hair was different, shorter, more structured, and she wore a tailored suit that screamed corporate success. I considered changing direction to avoid her, but she looked up before I could retreat. For a moment, we simply stared at each other across the crowded room. Then she excused herself from her conversation and walked toward me with the confident stride I'd once found so attractive. "David," she said, her voice neutral but not cold, "you look well." "Thank you, so do you." An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with unasked questions and unspoken accusations. "I heard about the Sequoia investment," she offered. "Finally, congratulations. Thank you. How's Pinnacle treating you?" A flicker of something, discomfort, guilt, crossed her face. "Challenging but rewarding. James has been very supportive of my professional development." The mention of his name still triggered a visceral response, a tightening in my chest, that I hoped didn't show on my face. "I'm glad it's working out for you." She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "I know you must hate me for how things ended. I handled it badly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about that." The apology, unexpected and insufficient, left me momentarily speechless. What was the appropriate response to such a statement? "Thank you for acknowledging how badly you hurt me. It's fine that you left me for your boss after 7 years together." "Life goes on," I managed finally. "We're both where we're supposed to be now." She studied my face, perhaps looking for bitterness or anger. Whatever she saw prompted a slight nod. "Yes, I suppose we are." Another pause, this one less tense but still charged with the peculiar intimacy that remains between former partners. The knowledge of each other's sleep patterns and food preferences, private jokes and personal failings, all suddenly irrelevant but impossible to forget. "I should get back," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the conference hall. "Good seeing you, David. You too, Rebecca." I watched her walk away, disappearing into the crowd of industry professionals. The encounter left me strangely calm. There had been no dramatic confrontation, no tearful reconciliation, no bitter exchange, just two people who had once shared everything, now exchanging pleasantries like distant acquaintances. Later that evening, at dinner with Michael and Samantha, I mentioned running into Rebecca. "How was that?" Michael asked cautiously. "Surprisingly okay," I realized. Like seeing someone I used to know a long time ago. That's progress, Samantha observed. When my ex and I first separated, I could barely stand being in the same building without having a panic attack. It helps that I'm finally sleeping. In my actual bed instead of on the couch, I joked. Amazing what proper rest can do for emotional stability. The ability to make even a mild joke about the situation felt like crossing an important threshold. The pain hadn't disappeared, but its edges had softened, becoming something I could carry without being crushed by its weight. The next morning, our lead developer burst into my office with news that would accelerate that healing process even further. "We have a problem," he announced without preamble. "Or maybe an opportunity. Either way, you need to see this." Placed his laptop on my desk, displaying a tech news article with a headline that made my heart race. Pinnacle Technologies delays launch of Phoenix security platform indefinitely. The article detailed how Pinnacle's much-anticipated new security protocol, their answer to emerging competitors like NexGen, had encountered insurmountable technical challenges during final testing. Industry analysts speculated that the setback could cost Pinnacle significant market share and damage investor confidence. I read the article twice, processing its implications. If accurate, this development would create a substantial opportunity for NexGen to establish our technology before Pinnacle could recover. "What do you think?" the developer asked eagerly. "Should we accelerate our timeline to capture those potential clients?" I closed the laptop, taking a moment to form my response. Part of me, a small, vindictive part I wasn't proud of, felt triumphant at Peterson's failure. But the larger realization was more profound. Our success and their failure weren't actually connected. NexGen would succeed or fail based on our own execution, not Pinnacle's missteps. "Let's stick to our plan," I decided. "Quality and security remain our priorities. We'll capture clients by delivering exceptional technology, not by rushing to exploit a competitor's problems." The developer nodded, perhaps disappointed by my measured response, but accepting the reasoning. After he left, I sat alone in my office, considering how differently I might have reacted 6 months earlier. The desire for revenge, to see Peterson fail as publicly and painfully as possible, had gradually given way to something more valuable. Genuine focus on building rather than destroying. That evening, I received an unexpected email from Thomas Rivera, requesting breakfast the following morning to discuss a significant development. His cryptic message offered no details, but instinct told me it related to Pinnacle's troubles. What I couldn't have anticipated was exactly how significant that development would prove to be, not just for NexGen, but for my personal journey through betrayal and recovery. Thomas Rivera was already seated when I arrived at Westlake Cafe, the upscale breakfast spot frequented by Seattle's tech elite. He'd chosen a corner table that offered both privacy and a commanding view of Elliott Bay. As I approached, I noted the 2 tablets and folder of documents arranged precisely on the table. Thomas never called meetings without substantial preparation. "David," he rose to shake my hand, his expression more animated than usual. "Thank you for meeting on such short notice." "Your message sounded important," I replied, taking the seat opposite him. A server appeared instantly with coffee. Thomas waited until she withdrew before leaning forward. "I assume you've seen the news about Pinnacle's Phoenix platform." The delay announcement. "Yes. Seems they've hit technical roadblocks." Thomas's mouth curved in what might generously be called a smile. In his 15 years as a venture capitalist, he'd developed a reputation for recognizing opportunities in others' misfortunes without appearing to relish them. "Roadblocks is a diplomatic term for what's happening there," he said, sliding one of the tablets toward me. "This is from my contact on Pinnacle's board." The screen displayed internal financial projections that made my breath catch. Phoenix wasn't just delayed, it was hemorrhaging money with no viable solution in sight. The project had already consumed $14 million, nearly triple its original budget, with engineers estimating another 6 months minimum before a functional release. "How did you get this?" I asked, scrolling through increasingly dire assessments. "That's not the important question," Thomas deflected smoothly. "What matters is what happens next. Pinnacle's board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. There's serious talk about abandoning Phoenix entirely and writing off the investment. And I digested this information, considering its implications for NexGen. That would create a significant opening in the market." "More than an opening," Thomas corrected. "It's a potential paradigm shift. Pinnacle has spent 18 months telling their enterprise clients about Phoenix's revolutionary capabilities. They've positioned it as the future of their security, offering, if they cancel it now, they'll face a crisis of confidence from those clients. The server returned with our breakfast orders. I waited until she was out of earshot before responding. I'm not interested in capitalizing on a competitor's failure, if that's what you're suggesting. NexGen will succeed on our own merits." Thomas cut into his omelette with surgical precision. Admirable sentiment, but business rarely allows for such clear moral boundaries. The question isn't whether to capitalize on Pinnacle's situation, but how to do so ethically while advancing your company's mission. He had a point. The tech industry was ruthlessly competitive, with companies constantly seeking advantage in others' missteps. Still, the personal complication, the fact that Pinnacle's CEO had taken my wife, made any strategic move against them feel potentially tainted by revenge. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked cautiously. Thomas set down his fork and opened the folder. "Meridian Systems has approached me about a potential partnership with NexGen." The name registered immediately. Meridian was Pinnacle's largest direct competitor, a respected industry player with global reach. A partnership with them would instantly elevate NexGen's profile and market access. "What kind of partnership?" "Initially, integration of your security protocol into their enterprise platform, potentially leading to investment or acquisition if the integration proves successful." I frowned. "I've been clear about wanting to build NexGen independently, not selling our technology to a larger player. And that position made sense when you were an unproven startup with limited resources," Thomas acknowledged. "But the landscape has changed. Pinnacle's failure creates a vacuum in the market that someone will fill. Partnering with Meridian would give you the resources to scale rapidly while maintaining your core vision." He slid a document across the table, a preliminary term sheet outlining a potential arrangement. The figures were substantial: $10 million for integration rights, with an additional $30 million earmarked for potential future investment. Numbers that could transform NexGen from promising startup to major industry player almost overnight. "Their CEO, Eleanor Zhao, wants to meet next week," Thomas continued. "She's flying in from San Francisco specifically to discuss this opportunity." I studied the document, mind racing. A partnership of this magnitude would accelerate our growth by years, providing resources we couldn't hope to acquire independently. But it also meant entangling our future with another company's vision and priorities. "I need to discuss this with Michael and the team," I said finally. "This affects all of us." Thomas nodded, seemingly pleased with my response. "Of course, but don't wait too long. Opportunities like this have short windows." As I left the cafe, Seattle's familiar rain matched my turbulent thoughts. Thomas was right about one thing. This was a potential inflection point for NexGen. The decision ahead would shape not just our company's trajectory, but my personal journey of rebuilding after Rebecca's departure. Back at the office, I called an emergency meeting with Michael and our core team, including Samantha. I presented Thomas's information about Pinnacle's troubles and Meridian's interest, careful to frame it as objectively as possible despite my complicated feelings. "This is huge," Michael said when I finished. "Meridian has the distribution channels we've been trying to build for years. We could reach enterprise clients we can't even approach right now." "But at what cost?" Samantha countered. "Integration partnerships have a way of becoming acquisitions. Would we maintain control over our technology's development?" The question went to the heart of my own concerns. NexGen wasn't just a business to me, it was the vision that had sustained me through personal collapse. The idea of ceding control, even partially, felt like risking another profound loss. "The terms specify technology licensing, not acquisition," I clarified. "We would maintain ownership of our IP while granting integration rights." "Initially," Michael emphasized. "But Thomas is right. This kind of partnership naturally evolves toward deeper integration, possibly acquisition." The discussion continued for hours, weighing potential benefits against risks, opportunities against concessions. With each point raised, I found myself considering not just business implications, but personal ones. Would partnering with Meridian feel like vindication or compromise? Would it represent moving forward or allowing past wounds to dictate present decisions? By evening, no consensus had emerged. The team dispersed, agreeing to reconvene the following day after processing the possibilities. I remained alone in the conference room, surrounded by whiteboards covered in scenarios and questions, none with clear answers. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Eleanor Zhao confirmed for Tuesday meeting. Need your decision by Monday." The timeline tightened the pressure. 4 days to determine NexGen's future direction. I drove home through rain that had intensified to a downpour, matching my internal storm. My apartment, still more residence than home despite recent efforts, offered little comfort. I poured myself a scotch and stood at the window, watching raindrops race down the glass while turning possibilities over in my mind. The doorbell's unexpected ring startled me from my thoughts. Opening the door revealed Michael, drenched from the rain and holding a paper bag. "Brought dinner," he announced, holding up the bag. "Figured you'd forget to eat otherwise." He was right, of course. Food had been the furthest thing from my mind. Michael moved through my apartment with the familiarity of a decade's friendship, setting out containers of Thai food while I grabbed plates and utensils. For several minutes, we ate in comfortable silence, the kind possible only with people who have weathered significant storms together. "So," he said finally, setting down his fork, "what's this really about? The partnership opportunity or the fact that Meridian could help take down the company run by the man who took your wife?" His directness was typical and exactly what I needed. "Both," I admitted. "I can't pretend the personal element isn't influencing my thinking. But I also can't let it drive a decision this important for everyone involved with NexGen." "No one expects you to be a robot, David. Of course this feels personal." "That's the problem. Business decisions shouldn't be personal." Michael leaned back, studying me. "That's bullshit corporate speak. Every significant business decision has personal elements, values, relationships, emotions. Pretending otherwise doesn't make them disappear. It just drives them underground, where they cause more damage." I considered his point. "So what? I should just embrace the fact that part of me wants to partner with Meridian to watch Peterson's company suffer." "No, you should acknowledge that feeling exists, then set it aside to consider the partnership on its genuine merits." Michael reached for his beer. "Look, I've known you long enough to recognize when you're overthinking something. The question isn't whether you can make a purely objective decision. No one can. The question is whether the partnership makes sense for NexGen regardless of your history with Pinnacle." His framing cut through my circular reasoning. "When you put it that way, Yes, I think it does make sense. The market opportunity is significant, and Meridian brings resources we need to capitalize on it fully. Then that's your answer. The fact that it might also create problems for Peterson is just a bonus, not the motivating factor. I smiled for what felt like the first time in days. When did you get so wise about emotional intelligence? Dating. A therapist has its educational benefits, he grinned. Speaking of which, when are you going to let me set you up with someone? It's been almost 8 months since Rebecca left. The abrupt shift to my personal life caught me off guard. I'm not ready for that. You sure about that, or are you just comfortable in the familiar pain? He held up his hands at my glare. Hey, just asking the question. You've rebuilt every other part of your life. Maybe it's time to consider that aspect too. I changed the subject back to business, but Michael's question lingered. Was I holding onto the pain of Rebecca's betrayal because it was somehow safer than risking new connections? The thought was uncomfortable enough that I knew it contained at least a grain of truth. The next morning, I called Thomas to confirm the meeting with Eleanor Zhao. If nothing else, exploring the partnership would force me to clarify my vision for NexGen's future and perhaps my own. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Michael, Samantha, and I developed questions, scenarios, and contingency plans for the Meridian discussion. By Monday evening, we had a comprehensive strategy regardless of which direction the conversation took. Tuesday arrived with unusual Seattle sunshine, perhaps a good omen. The meeting was scheduled at Meridian's Seattle satellite office, a sleek space occupying 3 floors of a downtown high-rise with views rivaling my apartments. Eleanor Zhao's reputation preceded her. At 53, she'd built Meridian from a regional player to a global technology force through strategic acquisitions and partnerships. Unlike many tech CEOs who cultivated celebrity personas, Eleanor maintained a deliberate low profile, rarely giving interviews or appearing at industry events. She greeted us in a conference room designed to impress without intimidating. Expensive but not ostentatious, with subtle displays of Meridian's global reach through art and artifacts from various countries where they operated. Thank you for making time to meet, she began, dispensing with small talk. I've reviewed your technology extensively and believe it represents a significant advancement in data security protocols. Her directness was refreshing after months of dancing around. Venture capitalists and potential clients. We appreciate your interest, I replied, though I'm curious what specifically attracted Meridian's attention to NexGen. Eleanor's slight smile suggested appreciation for my own directness. 3 factors. First, your encryption method achieves security levels we've been pursuing internally without success. Second, your focus on minimal processing overhead addresses the primary complaint about current security solutions. Third, she paused, making direct eye contact. Pinnacle's failure with Phoenix creates a market opportunity that our combined technologies could capitalize on immediately. The explicit mention of Pinnacle's troubles eliminated any need for diplomatic pretense. This was about business advantage in a competitive landscape, something I could engage with professionally. Despite the personal complications, a compelling case, I acknowledged, but integration partnerships are complex. We've built NexGen with a specific vision and would need assurances that vision remains intact. Understandable, Eleanor nodded. Let me be transparent about Meridian's interest. We don't want to acquire NexGen, at least not initially. What we want is exclusive integration rights to your security protocol for our enterprise platform. You maintain independence and continue development while we provide distribution channels and resources that would take years to build independently. The proposal aligned with what Thomas had outlined, but hearing it directly from Eleanor carried different weight. She wasn't presenting partnership as charity or rescue, but as mutual advantage, professional respect I hadn't fully expected. The meeting continued for 3 hours, delving into technical specifications, integration timelines, and financial arrangements. Throughout, Eleanor demonstrated surprising technical knowledge and strategic clarity. By the time we concluded, the partnership's potential benefits were even clearer than before. "We'll need a few days to review the specifics," I told her as we prepared to leave. "This decision affects our entire team." "Of course," she agreed, "but I hope you understand the time sensitivity. Pinnacle's board meets Thursday to determine Phoenix's fate. If they cancel the project as expected, there will be immediate market reaction. Being positioned with an alternative solution would be advantageous for both our companies." Her timeline wasn't arbitrary or pressuring, it reflected market realities. We all recognized. I promised an answer by Thursday morning, giving us less than 48 hours to make a decision that would reshape NexGen's future. That evening, our team gathered for an extended discussion of the Meridian opportunity. The debate was thorough, but ultimately reached consensus. The partnership offered benefits that outweighed potential constraints. "We'd be foolish to reject this," Michael concluded. "They're offering resources without demanding control. That's rare in this industry." Samantha, initially the most skeptical, had shifted position after meeting Eleanor. "She understands the technology. That matters. We won't be dealing with business people who see our work as just another asset to acquire and dismantle." Their perspectives reinforced my own evolving conclusion. This partnership represented not capitulation, but evolution, a chance to accelerate our vision with support from a company that valued what we'd built. I called Thomas that night to inform him of our decision. "We're accepting Meridian's proposal, with some technical modifications to the integration plan. I'll send details in the morning." "Excellent decision," he approved. "This positions NexGen perfectly for what's coming." "What do you mean, what's coming?" There was a pause before Thomas responded. "Industry sources indicate Pinnacle's troubles extend beyond Phoenix. Their last 2 quarterly reports showed concerning trends in cash flow and client retention. The Phoenix failure could trigger broader reassessment of their market position." The implications were clear. Pinnacle faced potential decline that could extend well beyond a single failed project. My partnership decision suddenly carried additional weight. It wasn't just about NexGen's growth, but potentially contributing to a significant market realignment. Sleep eluded me that night as I wrestled with complex emotions. Partnership with Meridian made business sense regardless of how it might affect Pinnacle. Yet I couldn't entirely separate professional strategy from personal history. Was I unconsciously seeking retribution through business means? Would satisfaction at Peterson's potential downfall taint what should be professional achievement? By morning, I'd reached a resolution of sorts. Yes, the personal element existed. Denying that would be dishonest, but it wasn't driving the decision. NexGen would partner with Meridian because doing so aligned with our mission to bring superior security technology to market. If that partnership created difficulties for Pinnacle and, by extension, for Peterson and Rebecca, that was a consequence of their choices, not my primary motivation. Thursday morning, I signed the preliminary agreement with Meridian, initiating a partnership that would transform NexGen from promising startup to significant market player. The timing proved fortuitous. Within hours, technology news outlets reported Pinnacle's official cancellation of Phoenix, sending their stock price into immediate decline. Michael forwarded me a particularly dramatic headline: "Pinnacle crashes as Phoenix fails to rise." "Feeling any schadenfreude?" his message asked. I considered the question honestly. There was satisfaction, certainly, but not the vindictive pleasure I might have expected months earlier. Instead, I felt a complex mixture of professional validation and something approaching closure. The market was confirming what I'd believed all along. Our approach to security technology was superior. That evening, as news of Pinnacle's troubles dominated industry discussions, I received an unexpected email from an address I didn't recognize, but with a subject line that caught my attention immediately. Congratulations on Meridian Partnership, Rebecca. My finger hovered over the delete button. What possible communication from Rebecca could benefit me now? Yet curiosity prevailed. The message was brief. David, heard about the Meridian Partnership. Truly impressive achievement. This isn't easy to write, but I wanted to say I was wrong about NexGen's potential. You've built something remarkable. Rebecca. I read it 3 times, trying to decipher motivation behind the words. Was this genuine acknowledgement or attempt at reconciliation? Now that her position at Pinnacle might be compromised. Did it matter either way? After careful consideration, I replied with equal brevity, "Thank you for the kind words. I hope you're well." No accusations, no bitterness, no reopening of wounds, just acknowledgement and simple courtesy. The exchange felt like closing a chapter rather than reviving it, another step toward whatever future awaited beyond the shadow of betrayal. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity as we implemented the Meridian Partnership. Technical teams collaborated on integration specifications, legal departments finalized contract details, and marketing groups developed messaging around our combined offering. Throughout this process, Pinnacle's troubles continued to mount. Industry analysts reported client defections, executive departures, and growing board dissatisfaction with Peterson's leadership. The Phoenix failure had apparently exposed deeper organizational issues previously masked by their market position. Thomas kept me informed of developments through his board connections, maintaining that awareness of competitor challenges was essential to strategic planning. While I no longer sought these updates with the same appetite, I recognized their professional value. Peterson's under extreme pressure, Thomas reported during one of our regular calls. 3 board members have called for his resignation, citing failure of technical vision and inadequate risk management. I absorbed this information with surprising detachment. 6 months earlier, news of Peterson's professional difficulties would have triggered intense satisfaction. Now it registered as relevant market intelligence rather than personal vindication. This evolution in my response wasn't lost on Michael, who remarked on it during a rare evening away from work, a Mariners game he'd insisted I attend, despite looming partnership deadlines. "You didn't even react when I mentioned Peterson might get fired," he observed as we found our seats. "That's progress," I shrugged. "His career trajectory doesn't affect mine anymore." "Exactly. That's what moving on actually looks like." Michael handed me a beer. "Now we just need to work on your personal life. You know Samantha's friend has been asking about you, right?" I nearly choked on my drink. "What? Who?" "Olivia, the architect who came to the office last month to discuss the expansion plans. She specifically asked if you were seeing anyone." The information triggered a mixture of panic and something I belatedly recognized as interest. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because you weren't ready to hear it," Michael replied calmly. "But I think you might be now." The possibility hung between us as the game began. Was I ready to consider dating again? The thought no longer produced the visceral aversion it once had. Maybe that was progress too. As summer transitioned to fall, NexGen continued its transformation. The Meridian Partnership expanded our client base exponentially, with enterprise companies adopting our security protocol at rates exceeding even optimistic projections. Our team grew to accommodate increasing demand, necessitating larger office space and more structured organizational systems. Through it all, I maintained a deliberate focus on building rather than competing, creating value through innovation rather than opposition to Pinnacle or any other company. This approach proved not just personally healthier, but professionally advantageous, attracting talent and partners who shared our constructive vision. In October, almost exactly 1 year after Rebecca's departure, industry news reported what many had been anticipating. James Peterson had resigned as Pinnacle's CEO, citing desire to pursue other opportunities in the standard language of corporate departures. The announcement crossed my desk during a particularly busy afternoon of meetings. I noted it briefly, then returned to preparation for our upcoming product launch, a significant expansion of our security offerings developed through the Meridian partnership. It wasn't until that evening, alone in my apartment with a rare glass of celebration scotch, that I fully processed the symmetry of the moment. The man who had taken my wife and attempted to acquire my company's technology had lost both his position and, according to industry gossip, his relationship with Rebecca, who had reportedly transferred to Pinnacle's East Coast office months earlier. The revelation brought not triumph, but a quiet recognition of life's unpredictable trajectories. My lowest moment, that Sunday evening when Rebecca walked out, had ultimately led to NexGen's greatest success and my own unexpected recovery. Peterson's apparent triumph had contained seeds of eventual downfall. As I stood at my window watching Seattle's lights reflect on Elliott Bay, I realized I'd crossed an invisible threshold. The story of Rebecca, Peterson, and betrayal no longer defined my narrative. It had become backstory, influential but not determining, remembered but not controlling. The next morning, I did something I'd been considering for weeks. I called Olivia, Samantha's architect friend, and asked her to dinner. Her immediate acceptance suggested Michael hadn't been exaggerating her interest. This step forward coincided with news that would further transform NexGen's trajectory and challenge my newfound equilibrium in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Eleanor Zhao requested an urgent meeting to discuss a significant market development with implications for our partnership. Her cryptic message offered no details, but instinct suggested it involved Pinnacle's increasingly precarious position following Peterson's departure. What I couldn't have predicted was exactly how directly this development would reconnect past and present, forcing me to confront the question of whether business success and personal healing could truly align. Without compromise, Eleanor Zhao's office offered a panoramic view of Seattle's skyline, the Space Needle framed perfectly between two skyscrapers, as if arranged specifically for the imposing mahogany desk where she conducted Meridian's business. Unlike our previous meetings, this one included only Eleanor and myself, no teams of lawyers or technical advisors. Whatever she wanted to discuss, it was clearly sensitive enough to warrant unusual privacy. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," she began, gesturing for me to take a seat in one of the precisely positioned leather chairs facing her desk. "I assume you've been following Pinnacle's situation since Peterson's resignation." "Only what's been reported publicly," I replied carefully. "Their stock has continued to decline, and there are rumors of layoffs." Eleanor nodded, her expression revealing nothing. At 53, she had mastered the art of corporate inscrutability, showing precisely what she intended and nothing more. "The situation is more dire than public reports suggest," she said, sliding a tablet across the desk. "This information is highly confidential, obtained through channels I won't specify." The screen displayed internal financial projections that made Pinnacle's precarious position starkly clear. Cash reserves depleting rapidly, client contracts up for renewal with concerning non-renewal predictions, debt covenants approaching dangerous thresholds. The company that had once defined enterprise security was potentially months away from financial crisis. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, looking up from the troubling numbers. Eleanor's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened with focus. Because Meridian is considering acquiring Pinnacle. The statement hit with physical force, momentarily stealing my breath. Meridian acquiring Pinnacle would reshape the entire industry landscape, consolidating two major players into an undisputed market leader. That's significant, I managed, struggling to process the implications. But why tell me? Our partnership agreement doesn't require Meridian to consult NexGen about acquisition targets. No, it doesn't. Eleanor leaned forward slightly. But this particular acquisition would have unique complications given your history with Pinnacle, specifically with James Peterson and your former wife. The direct acknowledgement of my personal connection to Pinnacle was unexpected. Throughout our partnership negotiations, Eleanor had maintained strictly professional focus, never once referencing the backstory that industry insiders undoubtedly discussed in private. My personal history doesn't factor into business decisions, I stated more firmly than I actually felt. Admirable in theory, Eleanor replied with the faintest hint of a smile, but we both know that's not how human psychology works, particularly when betrayal is involved. Her bluntness was jarring but oddly refreshing after months of people delicately avoiding the topic. What exactly are you concerned about? I asked. I'm concerned about nothing, she corrected. I'm assessing variables, as I do with any complex negotiation. If Meridian acquires Pinnacle, our partnership with NexGen becomes even more strategically valuable. Your security protocol would become the foundation for the combined company's offerings, replacing the failed Phoenix platform entirely. She paused, studying my reaction before continuing. However, integration would require collaboration between technical teams. Given Pinnacle's structure, some of their key personnel would inevitably work alongside NexGen staff, possibly including people connected to your former situation. Oh, the implication clarified her concern. Would my personal history interfere with business integration if former colleagues or even Rebecca herself became part of the extended team? That wouldn't be an issue, I assured her, with more confidence than I actually felt. Professional obligations would take precedence. Eleanor nodded, seemingly satisfied but not entirely convinced. I believe you intend that, but intentions and emotional reactions don't always align, particularly with unexpected triggers. She was right, of course. Despite my progress in moving beyond Rebecca's betrayal, I couldn't predict how I might react to suddenly working alongside people who had witnessed my humiliation or possibly participated in it through office gossip. What's your actual proposal? I asked, preferring direct business discussion to psychological speculation. Eleanor's posture shifted subtly, indicating transition to the heart of the meeting. Meridian wants to expand our partnership with NexGen beyond technology integration. We want you personally involved in the Pinnacle acquisition assessment and, if it proceeds, the integration planning. The request caught me off guard. You want me to help Meridian acquire the company where my ex-wife works and that her partner, until recently, ran? Precisely. Your technical knowledge of their systems would be valuable, but more importantly, your understanding of their organizational culture and key personnel would help us navigate potential integration challenges. The proposal was either brilliantly strategic or cruelly ironic, depending on perspective. Using my insider knowledge of Pinnacle, gained through Rebecca's years of sharing workplace details, to facilitate its absorption into a competitor. This feels, I searched for the right word, poetic? Eleanor supplied. Perhaps, but my interest is purely practical. You know Pinnacle's true strengths and weaknesses better than any consultant we could hire. That knowledge has significant value in acquisition planning. She was right again. Years of dinner conversations about Pinnacle's internal politics, organizational quirks, and technical limitations had given me insights few outsiders possessed. Information I had never sought to use against the company, but which now represented potential business advantage. "I need time to consider this," I said finally. "Of course." Eleanor stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. "But not too much time. Pinnacle's board meets next week to discuss strategic options. If Meridian makes an offer, it needs to be positioned before that meeting." I left her office with my thoughts in turmoil. The professional opportunity was significant, expanding. NexGen's partnership with Meridian while helping shape an industry-defining acquisition, but the personal implications felt murkier. Would participating in Pinnacle's takeover represent justified comeuppance or unhealthy vengeance? Business strategy or emotional score settling? These questions accompanied me back to NexGen's offices, where I found Michael waiting anxiously. "What did Eleanor want?" he asked as soon as I closed my office door. I explained the situation, watching his expression shift from surprise to calculation to something approaching dark amusement. "So, let me get this straight," he summarized. "The company that tried to buy our technology, run by the man who took your wife, might now be acquired by our partner, with your help in planning their corporate dismantling?" Put that way, the irony was undeniable. "That's the situation." Michael leaned back in his chair, whistling softly. "Hollywood couldn't write a better revenge scenario. The question is whether you want that role." That's exactly what I've been asking myself. Does participating make me petty and vindictive, or is it just good business sense? "Why does it have to be either or?" Michael challenged. "The fact that helping Meridian acquire Pinnacle might bring personal satisfaction doesn't invalidate the legitimate business reasons for doing it." His framing offered a perspective I hadn't fully considered, that professional and personal motivations could coexist without one corrupting the other. "I need to be certain I'm making this decision for the right reasons," I insisted. "Then ask yourself this. If Pinnacle were any other company with no personal connection, would Meridian's proposal make strategic sense for NexGen?" I considered the question honestly. Yes, integration with Meridian's expanded market share would accelerate adoption of our technology significantly. The combined entity would have resources and reach we couldn't achieve independently for years. "Then that's your answer," Michael concluded. "The personal element is just context, not the deciding factor." His logic was compelling but didn't entirely resolve my uneasiness. That evening, I found myself driving aimlessly through Seattle's rain-slicked streets, past familiar landmarks that now held different associations. The restaurant where Rebecca and I had celebrated our anniversary, the park where we'd walked on countless Sunday mornings, the office building where she now worked for the company I was considering helping dismantle. Eventually, I found myself parked near Kerry Park, overlooking the city skyline illuminated against the night sky. The same view appeared in countless Seattle postcards, but tonight it seemed to hold particular significance, the lights of various corporate headquarters marking territories in an invisible business battlefield. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia, the architect I'd recently started dating. "How did your mysterious meeting go?" Her message reminded me that life had indeed continued beyond betrayal. We'd been on 3 dates so far, each more engaging than the last. Olivia was intelligent, creative, and refreshingly direct, qualities I'd come to value more since Rebecca's departure. There was potential there, still fragile but genuine. I started to type a response explaining the Meridian situation, then hesitated. This new relationship deserved focus on its own merits, not as a sounding board for decisions entangled with my past. Instead, I simply replied, Complex business proposal. Still processing. Rain check on dinner tomorrow. Her response came quickly. Of course. Call when you're free. No pressure. The absence of pressure, of emotional manipulation, struck me as particularly valuable. Whatever developed between Olivia and me would be built on transparency and mutual respect, not unspoken expectations or hidden agendas. That realization helped clarify my thinking about the Meridian proposal. The question wasn't whether helping acquire Pinnacle represented revenge, whether that motivation existed as an undercurrent, but whether I could approach the task with professional integrity despite that context. The next morning, I called Eleanor Zhao with my decision. I'll help assess the acquisition opportunity, I told her, but with two conditions. First, all recommendations must prioritize business value and technology integration, not organizational disruption. Second, I won't personally manage any integration involving Rebecca or former close colleagues. Eleanor's agreement was immediate and without qualification. Those terms are entirely reasonable. I'll have my team send over the preliminary assessment documents today. We'll need your initial analysis by Friday. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of confidential meetings, financial evaluations, and strategic planning sessions. Meridian's acquisition team operated with military precision, dissecting Pinnacle's business from every angle. Market position, technical assets, client relationships, personnel structures, financial obligations. My role focused primarily on technology assessment, evaluating which Pinnacle systems complemented Meridian's offerings, which represented redundancy, and how NexGen Security Protocol could serve as the foundation for integrated solutions. The work was challenging but straightforward, allowing me to contribute genuine value without directly engaging with the personal complications lurking beneath the surface. Until, inevitably, those complications surfaced. 3 weeks into the assessment process, Eleanor forwarded a message that had apparently arrived through Meridian's corporate development channels. Rebecca Wilson requests meeting regarding Pinnacle acquisition rumors. States has critical information relevant to valuation. Rebecca, using her maiden name again, reaching out through official channels regarding acquisition rumors that weren't yet public. How do you want to handle this? Eleanor asked when I called her. Our standard protocol would be to schedule an exploratory meeting with appropriate non-disclosure agreements, but given the circumstances, the polite corporate euphemism for the fact that the woman who had left me for her boss was now seeking a meeting about her company's potential acquisition. What exactly did her message say? I asked. Only what I forwarded. She referenced critical valuation information, but provided no specifics. Could be legitimate insight or simply an attempt to gain information about our intentions. Or an attempt to make contact with me through business channels, now that personal ones were closed. The possibility couldn't be dismissed given the timing. Have someone else take the meeting, I decided. Your regular corporate development team. I'll review their notes afterward if the information appears credible. Eleanor agreed, and I pushed the incident from my mind, focusing instead on the technical evaluation that represented my primary responsibility. But 3 days later, the situation escalated when Michael forwarded an email that had arrived at his personal address. David needs to know about Pinnacle's hidden liability issues before any acquisition proceeds. The Phoenix failure was just the visible part of more systemic problems. Please have him contact me directly. This isn't about our personal history. Rebecca. The message's arrival in Michael's inbox rather than mine suggested Rebecca had anticipated I might block or ignore direct communication. Using him as an intermediary demonstrated both resourcefulness and desperation, neither of which I could simply dismiss. What do you think? Michael asked when I called him. Legitimate business concern or pretext? I don't know, I admitted. But the reference to hidden liability issues seems specific enough to warrant follow-up. You want me to respond? I considered the options. Ignoring the outreach might mean missing information relevant to Meridian's acquisition assessment. Engaging directly risked reopening personal wounds or creating complications in the carefully structured evaluation process. Tell her I'll review any information she wants to provide, but only through proper channels. She can submit documentation to Meridian's corporate development team with appropriate confidentiality protections. Michael's response was measured. That's professionally appropriate, but are you sure you don't want to know what she's really after? This feels like more than just business concern. That's exactly why I'm maintaining formal channels, I explained. Whatever her motivation, the acquisition assessment needs to remain objective and documented. My instinct proved correct. The following day, Rebecca submitted a detailed report to Meridian outlining what she characterized as unrecognized compliance risks in Pinnacle's government contracts division, issues that could potentially trigger regulatory penalties or contract cancellations if not addressed before acquisition. Meridian's legal team verified that her concerns had merit, potentially affecting acquisition valuation by millions. The information was specific, documented, and delivered without personal commentary or requests, purely professional intelligence that any responsible employee might provide when their company faced acquisition. Yet, questions lingered. Why had Rebecca chosen this moment to reveal problems she had presumably known about for some time? Why approach through unusual channels rather than Pinnacle's standard whistleblower processes? And most puzzling, why risk her own position by exposing problems that her current leadership might prefer to conceal from potential acquirers? The answers emerged a week later when Thomas Rivera called with information from his industry sources. Rebecca Wilson has resigned from Pinnacle, he reported, effective immediately, with no announced next position. The news shouldn't have affected me as strongly as it did. Rebecca's career movements were no longer relevant to my life, yet her abrupt departure from Pinnacle immediately after revealing internal problems to Meridian created unavoidable questions. Any indication why? I asked, maintaining professional tone despite genuine curiosity. Nothing official, Thomas replied, but my source suggests it wasn't entirely voluntary. Apparently, word leaked that she had provided information to Meridian. Pinnacle's interim leadership considered it betrayal of company interests. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rebecca, who had betrayed our marriage for professional advancement at Pinnacle, now possibly pushed out for perceived betrayal of that same company. That's unfortunate, I said, unsure what other response was appropriate. Perhaps, Thomas agreed, though it potentially simplifies the acquisition integration planning, one fewer complicated personnel situation to navigate. His clinical assessment of a human situation that had once been the center of my emotional universe struck me as both jarring and illuminating. To most of the business world, Rebecca was simply a data point in an acquisition equation, relevant only insofar as her presence or absence affected organizational outcomes. The realization provided unexpected clarity about my own role in the unfolding acquisition process. I wasn't participating to settle personal scores or witness corporate karma in action. I was contributing professional expertise to a business transaction with significant implications for NexGen's future, Meridian's market position, and the hundreds of employees whose livelihoods depended on successful integration. With that perspective firmly established, I threw myself into the technical assessment with renewed focus. My team developed comprehensive integration scenarios for Pinnacle's salvageable technologies, identifying potential synergies and redundancies with clinical precision. The work was challenging, engaging, and entirely separate from the personal. history that had initially made Eleanor hesitant to involve me. 6 weeks into the assessment process, Meridian's board approved proceeding with a formal acquisition offer. The proposed terms valued Pinnacle at approximately 60% of its peak market capitalization before the Phoenix failure, a substantial discount reflecting both its technological setbacks and precarious financial position. "We submit the offer tomorrow morning," Eleanor informed me during our final pre-offer review. "Pinnacle's board has scheduled an emergency session to consider it immediately. Given their limited options, acceptance is likely." "The journey here wasn't linear," I continued, acknowledging the reality without dwelling on details everyone in the industry already knew. There were setbacks, course corrections, and lessons learned. But the foundation remained consistent, building technology that creates genuine security rather than just the appearance of it. As I outlined the new company's structure and vision, I realized how thoroughly my perspective had transformed. 2 years ago, success had seemed inextricably linked to proving Rebecca wrong, showing Peterson the value of what he'd failed to acquire, vindicating choices others had questioned. Now those motivations felt as distant as the pain that had once accompanied them. Success had revealed itself as something both simpler and more profound, creating value that wouldn't exist otherwise, building relationships based on mutual respect rather than convenience, establishing systems that worked because they were designed with integrity from the beginning. The press conference concluded with the expected questions about market strategy, competitive positioning, and growth projections. I answered each with the confidence of someone who had navigated more difficult terrain than financial forecasts or product roadmaps. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed into smaller conversation groups, Thomas approached with characteristic directness. "Not bad for a company that started with one angry engineer in a spare bedroom," he observed. "Though I'm not sure angry quite captures your state when we first met." I smiled at his understated reference to our initial meeting, me sleep-deprived and shell-shocked from Rebecca's departure, pitching a security protocol that existed more as concept than product. "Determined might be more accurate," I suggested. "Anger was just the fuel for something more constructive." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "Most people stay stuck in the anger phase, or worse, let it dictate their strategic decisions. You channeled it differently." I had good advisors and motivation that went beyond proving people wrong. "Speaking of people," Thomas gestured subtly across the room where Michael was engaged in animated conversation with several investors. "Your team made all the difference. Loyalty like that isn't common in this industry." He was right. Throughout the turbulent journey from startup to acquisition to public spin-off, our core team had remained intact, not from lack of options, but from shared commitment to what we were building. "We've been through a lot together," I acknowledged. "They've earned their equity several times over." As Thomas moved on to speak with Eleanor, I found myself momentarily alone, a rare state during such events. The brief solitude offered space to appreciate the distance traveled from that kitchen confrontation with Rebecca. The path from there to here had been neither direct nor painless, but its destination exceeded anything I could have imagined in those first dark days. Olivia appeared at my side, her presence grounding in the midst of corporate celebration. "Congratulations, CEO," she said, a touch of teasing in her voice. "How does it feel to make it official?" "Surreal," I admitted, though less about the title than the journey to get here. She nodded, understanding the layers in my response. One of the gifts in our relationship had been her willingness to acknowledge the past without being threatened by it, recognizing that previous chapters, even painful ones, formed essential context for the present. "I saw something interesting on my way in," she mentioned casually. "The Seattle Business Journal did a feature on today's announcement. Apparently, they reached out to Rebecca for comment. My stomach tightened instinctively, though not with the sharp pain such mentions once triggered. What did she say? Just that she wasn't surprised by your success, that you always had extraordinary vision but needed the right circumstances to fully realize it. Olivia studied my reaction. Does that bother you? I considered the question honestly. No, it feels irrelevant, actually. Her opinion stopped mattering a long time ago. Olivia smiled. That's genuine healing, not absence of feeling, but perspective about what feelings deserve your energy. Her observation captured something essential about the past 2 years. The journey hadn't been about eliminating pain or erasing memories, but about integrating them into a larger narrative that included growth, connection, and creation alongside loss. The rest of the day passed in a blur of interviews, congratulations, and planning discussions for the public company's launch. By evening, when only our core team remained, Michael opened champagne in the conference room that had witnessed countless pivotal moments in NexGen's evolution. To David, he proposed, raising his glass, who turned personal catastrophe into professional triumph through sheer stubborn determination. To all of us, I corrected, including everyone in the toast, NexGen has never been about one person's vision, but what we've built together. The celebration continued into the night, marking not just corporate achievement, but personal reconciliation, with a path none of us had anticipated. When I finally returned to the apartment Olivia and I now shared, a space designed together, filled with deliberate choices rather than temporary accommodations, I found myself drawn to the window overlooking the city. Seattle's skyline glittered with the same lights visible from my old apartment, but they no longer represented territories in a business battlefield. They were simply part of a landscape where both professional success and personal happiness had proven possible, even after devastating loss. The journey from betrayal to vindication had revealed an unexpected truth. The most meaningful victory wasn't watching Rebecca or Peterson face consequences for their choices. It was building something valuable that wouldn't have existed otherwise. A company, yes, but also a life reconnected to purpose beyond reaction to others' actions. Olivia joined me at the window, slipping her arm around my waist with the comfortable familiarity that had developed between us. "Penny, for your thoughts." "Just appreciating the view," I replied, "and reflecting on how different things look depending on where you're standing." She rested her head against my shoulder. "And how does it look from here?" I considered the question, taking in both the literal cityscape and the metaphorical landscape of my life. 2 years after its foundation seemed shattered beyond repair. "Better than I could have imagined," I answered honestly. Not because of what happened with Pinnacle or the spin-off announcement, but because of what those circumstances revealed about possibility, professional and personal. Olivia nodded, understanding without requiring elaborate explanation. Another gift of our relationship. We stood together watching the city lights, comfortable in shared silence that needed no filling. The story that began with Rebecca walking out had found its resolution not in dramatic confrontation or elaborate revenge, but in the quieter victory of creating something meaningful from painful beginnings. Whatever challenges awaited, leading a public company, deepening personal connections, navigating an ever-changing industry, would be approached from that foundation of resilience and perspective. Life had revealed its capacity for renewal, not by erasing painful chapters, but by continuing beyond them into possibilities previously unimagined. That was the real triumph, not over others who had caused pain, but over the temptation to let that pain define the story's conclusion. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.